Catch an all-new episode of Code Lyoko.
Xana is up to her old tricks again.
The fate of Lyoko and Earth.
My name's Brandon and this is Cartoon Network Video Game History, a show where I take a look back on all of the video games based on Cartoon Network franchises and retrospectively review them. This week it's with a heavy heart that I must announce that I'm reviewing another Code Lyoko game. This time we're moving to home consoles as we review Code Lyoko Quest for Infinity. The first Code Lyoko game was on the Nintendo DS and was quite literally one of my least favourite games ever. It combined unenjoyable combat with tedious and unfathomably long point-and-click walking sections to make an extremely unenjoyable experience. Code Lyoko is back, this time on the Wii, PlayStation 2, and the PlayStation Portable. Despite me being so down on Code Lyoko in general, the background surrounding this game is actually quite interesting. At least there's one positive before heading into this game. The Wii version of Quest for Infinity was released on November 16, 2007, exactly 6 months and 1 day after the release of the first Code Lyoko game. For a period of time, it seemed like Code Lyoko games were going to be exclusive to Nintendo platforms. However, in July of 2008, the PS2 and PSP versions landed on store shelves. Interestingly, these ports were released about 1 month after Code Lyoko Fall of Xana came out on the Nintendo DS, which was the final Code Lyoko game. Apparently, there were also plans for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 ports according to a line on Wikipedia, but seeing as there's no citation for it, I'm quite skeptical. Quest for Infinity was published by our good friends at the Game Factory. However, for the actual development, we saw a switch up. Get Ready to Virtualize was developed by DC Studios, but they ceased to exist by September of 2007. Most of DC was actually absorbed into the, at the time, recently founded Firebrand Studios, who developed the DS version of Cartoon Network Racing. Instead, this game was developed by French developer Nico Entertainment. Licensed games were their bread and butter at the time, working on Charlie's Angels, Crazy Frog, and Postman Pat. They're actually still kicking around today, having most recently worked on Farming Simulator 18. Curiously, Quest for Infinity is a legitimate sequel to Get Ready to Virtualize. It pretty much picks up where the story left off and quite literally plays in the exact same style as the DS game, albeit with the added power of the new consoles it came to. Knowing this, it's actually really strange that the DS isn't one of the consoles Quest for Infinity released on. Seems silly to release a sequel to a DS game but ignore the DS altogether. I'd really love to know whether DC Studios were originally slated to develop this game before they were shut down. Almost everything here is taken directly from the first game, so it really feels like they had some sort of hand in it. As I mentioned, there is a third game in this series. This was also developed by Nico Entertainment, however it returned exclusively to the Nintendo DS and radically changed the genre into a turn-based RPG. Based on those drastic changes, something tells me Nico Entertainment didn't get a whole lot of say in Quest for Infinity's design. With critics, this game fared poorly. Its Metacritic average is a 58, which is slightly lower than the first game, but a full 7 points higher than Fall of Xana. At the positive end of the scale, it received a 7.5, while at the lower end, it received a 5.5 from IGN. I despised the first Code Lyoko game, so fingers crossed this is better. As I said in the intro, Code Lyoko Quest for Infinity is a proper sequel, which is the very first time this has ever happened in Cartoon Network video game history. Many franchises like Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab have received countless games, but none of them ever received a spiritual sequel, let alone a legit sequel that continues the story. As far as I can tell, of the games we have left in this series, only some of the Ben 10 games and the Steven Universe games are the only other times this happens. Never underestimate the drawing power of French animation fans. The first game's story covered the first 2 seasons of the show and got into the early stages of Season 3 with the finale. Apparently the latter half of Season 3 wasn't important because this game jumps ahead to Season 4. In this game, the story focuses around saving William from the evil clutches of Xana. William is a character that you will be extremely confused by if you've only played the games or seen the first couple of seasons. The game just kicks off expecting you to know who the hell this random kid is, but I was left clueless. For all I knew, William was just a new bad guy to change things up from the unending stream of robots that the Lyoko kids had to fight. While it's not great for casual or non-fans, I could imagine the story here would be great for committed fans. There are loads of cutscenes here, but not too many that it starts to get annoying and tedious. Looking at you, Days Gone, with your 6 billion hours of cutscenes. From what I can tell, this is a decent retelling of the show's plot, so die-hard fans will be satisfied. What's the game like outside of the story though? Well, it's a mixed bag in my opinion. When you first jump into the game, you'll be left scratching your head at what's going on. You see, the main menu is presented in such a weird way that it actually makes it seem like you're already into the game. It's sort of reminiscent of the walking around sections of the first game, which immediately gave me PTSD flashbacks. However, you soon find out that it's this weird hybrid that works as a main menu where you can fiddle with the options, load save games, and look at extras, while also doubling as some way that you can chat to characters and select your next mission. The game is also fully voice acted, even in the short little vignettes you get at the main menu, which I really appreciated.
Okay, Jeremy?
No worries, cutie. I'm in great shape. Not to panic. It's Jeremy's clone.
Thankfully, when it comes to the actual gameplay, no walking segments are present. Nico Entertainment had the smarts to completely chop the absolute worst part of the first game. Once you jump into the actual game, you'll find something strikingly familiar, albeit a little bit more polished. Graphically, the game is an obvious upgrade going from a handheld to home consoles. Because the Lyoko sections of the show are all presented in 3D, the characters look perfect in action here. I honestly don't have a bad thing to say about it from a visual perspective. Unfortunately, the environments are pretty damn bland here yet again. I'm not going to hold this against the game though, as I'm 100% sure this is the show's fault. Having revisited Season 1 of Code Lyoko relatively recently, I've experienced firsthand how boring, bland, and dull the Lyoko settings can be. 99 times out of 100, it's just some sparse, open plain, with the colours changing based on whether it's set in the desert, snow, or forest. Considering its source material, I think Nico have done well enough to make environments that aren't too terrible. The game engine was completely reused from Get Ready to Virtualize, which definitely shows in a lot of areas. However, the combat has received a massive tweak. Combat is actually sort of enjoyable now. It's nothing to tell your friends about, but it's a major step up from its predecessor. Character movement is much more fluid, giving you the freedom to zip around levels as well as when faced with enemies. When it comes time to fight, it actually felt like you could string together some moves and had some sort of control over how battles play out. While it does feel better to play, combat is still not hitting the mark in this series. Attacking is just as shallow as it was in Get Ready to Virtualize, which is a major disappointment. The game is laughably easy because of this. Just pick literally any of the 4 character options, mash the attack button, and you'll be moving on in no time. While the game is easy with any character, Odd is quite clearly the standout. He has the strongest and most reliable ranged attack, meaning you can sit back and easily dodge enemy projectiles while picking everything off. Ulrich is definitely the second best, as his sword swings will often lock enemies into a feedback loop, meaning they'll never be able to start their attack animations. Once you've grasped the basics of combat in the opening level, that's quite literally the extent of the game's offensive mechanics. There's never anything to change the game up. You're literally doing the exact same thing from your first minute in the game to your 6th hour in the game. The only time you ever need to use your brain during combat is the rare occasions where a specific enemy can only be damaged by a specific character. These instances are so few and far between that you'll actually forget that it's part of the game. Characters again have special abilities, with some returning, like Odd's environmental traversal abilities, while there are some new ones. Whether it's Yumi's ability to walk over narrow gaps and move things with her mind, or Aileda's ability to manufacture platforms out of thin air, the overwhelming majority of these abilities help you navigate the world. The developers actually use these in a sort of interesting way, gating off specific sections of levels until you have the required power. You'll always come back to these sections in the course of the story, which is kinda neat, but mostly feels like a half-hearted step towards something truly interesting. Thankfully, Nico have once again identified one of the worst parts of Get Ready to Virtualize and removed it. In this instance, it was the annoying choice to only let you switch between characters at checkpoints. Here you can switch whenever you like, and it makes the game flow much more smoothly. Unfortunately, the special abilities don't come without their negatives, and I mean major negatives. The simple fact that most of these abilities control like arse is too big to ignore. Most of them boil down to a basic quick time event, however for some reason they just don't function well. Take Odd's wall jumping for example. You're tasked with pressing the required direction with the analog stick. Seems simple enough, right? Well, one easy flick isn't enough. You'll end up having to flick it multiple times, making for a very awkward and uncomfortable experience. Odd's wall climbing is also extremely fidgety and annoying to use a lot of the time. Yumi's balance walking is the stuff of nightmares. You need to spam L1 or R1 to keep her balanced, sort of like grinding in the Tony Hawk games. Here it feels like 99% of the time the game isn't even registering your button presses, resulting in deaths that feel rather cheap. To top it off, her telekinesis powers are so slippery that it makes even the toughest ice level look like child's play. Vehicle sections have returned here too, but instead of being dumb and boring like in Get Ready to Virtualize, they're actually okay here. This time you're basically playing a shmup. It controls okay and is a nice change of pace from the regular gameplay. However, just like the normal gameplay, it never changes or adds new wrinkles, so it ends up suffering from the same problems. Again, just like the first game, there's an upgrade system. Anyone starting to notice a pattern here? It's almost like DC Studios literally just developed this game. Like Get Ready to Virtualize, you'll pick up points from combat and destroying things in the environment, which can then be used for upgrading either your combat or your special abilities. Unfortunately, the game arbitrarily locks you out of some upgrades until it wants you to upgrade. I found that I was getting a shitload of points, but could never spend them because the game didn't want me to become more powerful. It got to the point where I was really questioning why the upgrade system even existed. I wasn't having to carefully allocate my points, so the game might as well have done away with all of that and just automatically upgraded me whenever it wanted. By far the most annoying thing that Quest for Infinity brings over from its predecessor is the ridiculous length. This game is at minimum 6 hours long. Now, usually this isn't too bad, But in a game where you've basically experienced all of the mechanics within the first 30 minutes, that's not exactly great. You're just doing the same things over and over and over again, to the point where you're just on autopilot hoping to get to the end. This is actually one of the longest Cartoon Network games I've played so far, which should be a positive, but because it never tries to change anything up, it becomes a negative.
Join the battle against Xana with Code Lyoko Quest for Infinity for the Wii gaming system. The fate of the worlds of Earth and Lyoko are in great danger, and our heroes are ready to risk everything to win the fight. Dive deep into the digital sea in search of a mysterious creature, battle evil clones, all while fighting off the non-stop attacks of Xana. Each mission is more hair-raising than the next as you shoot, fight, explore, and solve puzzles. The fate of Lyoko and Earth are up to you. Rated E for everyone 10 and up.
Code Lyoko Quest for Infinity is a mixed bag. It's so clearly a step up from Get Ready to Virtualize, and it does away with some of the very worst parts of that game. But just because it's better than an abysmal game does not mean that it's a good game itself. The biggest issue is how repetitive it is, while also never giving you any new developments to the gameplay. The gameplay is so shallow that it borders on mindless most of the time, and while it functionally plays okay, you'll never have to do much other than just spam the attack button. When you factor in that you're just doing the exact same thing on repeat for 6 hours, it becomes obvious why this isn't a highly regarded game. I'm sure fans of the show enjoyed the faithful recreation on offer here, but video game fans are going to be left wanting with Quest for Infinity.